History remembers the end before the beginning. We see the sword, the executioner, specially imported from France, and the blood on the straw at the Tower of London. We see Anne Boleyn as the tragic victim or the manipulative seductress who tore England apart. But monsters and martyrs aren't born, they are made. Before the crown, before the scandals, and long before the sharp edge of the blade kissed her neck, Anne was something else entirely. A project. A carefully constructed weapon designed to conquer the most dangerous battlefield on Earth, the royal court. To understand why she died, we have to look at how she lived before the world knew her name. We must travel back to Hever Castle in Kent. Today, tourists wander its manicured gardens, imagining a fairy tale childhood. But 500 years ago, this wasn't just a home. It was a factory. A training ground where the Boleyn children, Anne, Mary, and George, were forged into instruments of ambition. The air here wasn't filled with the laughter of children, but with the heavy, suffocating weight of expectation. Every lesson, every prayer, and every polished mannerism had a price tag attached. Anne didn't know it yet, but her childhood at Hever was merely the rehearsal for a play that would end in her annihilation. If Anne was the weapon, her father, Thomas Boleyn, was the blacksmith. History often paints him as a mere courtier, but look closer at his tomb, and you see the truth. He was a predator in silk robes. Rising through the ranks under Henry VII and Henry VIII, Thomas understood one brutal fact. In the Tudor court, you are either climbing or you are dying. He wasn't just talented, he was relentless. He mastered languages, crowned duchesses, and jousted with kings, collecting titles like trophies. But his greatest assets weren't his lands or his diplomacy, they were his children. He looked at his daughters, Mary and Anne, and didn't see little girls to be protected. He saw pawns to be placed on the chessboard of Europe. He was a humanist, yes, believing in education for women, but this wasn't modern feminism. This was calculation. An uneducated daughter is a liability. A brilliant daughter is a diplomatic asset. So, Thomas drilled into them a lethal combination of charm, intellect, and obedience.
She has been ridden by far too many grooms, wouldn't you agree?
These Boleyn siblings,
Perhaps the king
bonded
will tire
by the
of this
pressure
one
of
soon
a
enough.
father who demanded nothing less than perfection. He prepared them to be exported, to serve queens, and to catch the eyes of kings. And for Anne, the first test of this brutal education was about to begin. Before she was sent away to be polished by foreign courts, Anne left a piece of her soul at Hever. We have it still, a book of hours, a personal prayer book illuminated by calfskin vellum. It's a beautiful, holy object, but scribbled inside is a message that sends shivers down the spine of anyone who knows her fate. Under an image of the Last Judgment, a young Anne wrote, "Le temps viendra," the time will come. It was likely a statement of religious faith, a pious reminder of Christ's return.
My lord.
But looking back through the lens of history, it reads like a haunting premonition. The time will come. The time for glory, the time for the crown, or the time for the fall.
Remember your duty to this
Anne was a
family
woman
and to the
of
king.
intense,
Do not
fiery
fail
faith.
us.
The kind of faith that would later give her the audacity to challenge the Pope himself. But faith alone wouldn't help a 12-year-old girl survive the Shark Tank of European politics. In 1513, Thomas Boleyn decided his masterpiece was ready for the market. He shipped Anne off to the Netherlands, to the court of Margaret of Austria. She was no longer a child of Kent. She was now a diplomat in training, thrown into the deep end of the Holy Roman Empire. Imagine being 12 years old, alone in a foreign land, surrounded by the most powerful people in Europe. Most would crumble. Anne Boleyn thrived. At the court of Margaret of Austria, she learned that charm was a currency. We have a letter she wrote back to her father, a desperate, heartbreaking attempt to prove her worth. Written in fractured French, riddled with spelling mistakes,
God, the man
it is
has
the
no
voice of a
taste
girl
whatsoever.
terrified of
You
disappointing
are
the man
too
who sent
witty,
her
my
there.
lady.
She apologizes for her handwriting. She calls herself his most humble daughter. You can feel the anxiety radiating off the parchment. She wasn't just learning a language, she was learning how to mold herself into whatever the world wanted her to be. Margaret of Austria, a formidable ruler in her own right, was impressed, calling Anne pleasant and well-educated. Anne was passing the test, but the Netherlands was just a finishing school. The real university of power was France, and in 1514 the pieces moved again. Anne was transferred to the French court, a place of dazzling beauty and dark, seductive danger. It was here that the final layer of the Anne Boleyn we know would be applied. France in the 16th century was the center of the universe, sophisticated,
This little book holds
artistic,
secrets the
and sexually
Tudors would
charged.
kill for.
Anne was placed in the service of
perhaps
Queen
still
Claude,
do.
a pious and quiet woman, but the court itself was run by giants. Here, Anne watched and learned. She saw King Francis I, a man of immense ego. She saw the other women, the mistresses who held more power than the wives. She saw her own sister, Mary Boleyn, become the mistress of the French king, only to be discarded and labeled a great whore. This was a crucial lesson, one that would define Anne's strategy later with Henry VIII. She learned that access to the king's bed was easy, but holding the king's attention required something else. It required mystery. It required intelligence. It required the ability to say no. While her sister fell, Anne was sharpening her mind in the company of women like Marguerite de Navarre, the king's sister, a radical thinker who flirted with dangerous religious reforms. These ideas that the church could be changed, that a woman could hold intellectual court, seeped into Anne's bones. She wasn't just learning how to dress or dance, she was learning how to think dangerously.
A fine morning,
she fell
gentlemen.
in love with the
Has
French
His Majesty
style,
arrived
the
in the
French
presence
language,
chamber yet?
and
Not
the
yet,
French
Master
way of
Boleyn.
wielding
We
power
are all
from the
eagerly
shadows.
awaiting him.
For 7 years, Anne soaked up the continent. She became, in essence, a French woman in an English body. But in 1522, the call came to return home. Relations between England and France were souring, and Thomas Boleyn needed his asset back
You
in
have
London.
jeopardized
Anne
everything,
returned,
Mary.
not as
Such
the nervous
gross
girl who
negligence
left,
cannot be forgiven.
but as a woman
You are
of
banished
21,
from court
armed
immediately.
with a charisma that English courtiers had never seen before. She stepped back into a court dominated by one woman, Queen Catherine of Aragon.
Your achievement
We
is
often
noted.
think of Catherine
No,
as the
these
old,
books will
discarded
not
wife,
organize
but the
themselves.
woman Anne met was a titan. Dressed in cloth of gold, the daughter of Spanish monarchs, Catherine was formidable, regal, and beloved. This was the mountain Anne would eventually have to climb. At the time, nobody, least of all Anne, could have imagined she would be the one to topple this Spanish giant. Anne didn't return as a beauty queen. By the standards of the time, she was merely moderately attractive. She was too thin, her skin too olive, her mouth too wide. But she had something else. She had the French polish. She had wit that could cut like a knife, and eyes that, as contemporaries noted, could invite to conversation. She was a spark in a room full of dull candles. March 1522. The moment Anne Boleyn officially announced herself to the English world. The event was a pageant called the Chateau Vert. The court played dress-up, enacting an elaborate play about virtues and vices. Anne was cast in a role that, with
Did you hear
500
what
years of
happened to the
hindsight,
Duke? He lost
screams with
everything
irony.
at the card table
She
last
played
night.
Serve him right.
perseverance.
He cheated the
Dressed in
Count
a
last
gown
month.
of white satin and gold, her battle armor, she danced before King Henry VIII. She wasn't the star, she was just one of the ladies. But she was the one who caught the light, while her sister Mary played
Meer wijn. De
kindness,
Rijnwijn is
soft,
uitstekend
yielding,
vanavond.
easily
Heb je
taken,
de pastei
and stood
geprobeerd?
as perseverance.
You are by
Hard,
far the most
unyielding,
captivating woman in this court,
determined.
my sweet Mary.
It was a role she
Your
would play for
Majesty
the
is
next
too
14
kind.
years, persevering
Only
through
honest.
scandal, through hatred, and through the king's maddening
She should not
courtship.
display such
She wore the
weakness.
English fashion
Indeed.
that day.
Her
The gable
sister
hood
knows
that
better.
framed her face like a stiff house,
If the Emperor
proving
hears
she
of
could
this
play the
alliance, we
English
are
rose
both
when she
lost.
needed to.
He suspects
But underneath
already.
the satin,
We must
the
send
mind
word
was
to the king
French,
immediately.
and the ambition was pure.
Regardez-la.
The
La
trap
petite
was
Anglaise
set,
n'est pas si
though
fière
neither the
maintenant.
hunter
Non,
nor
elle
the
a
prey
trouvé son
knew it
maître,
yet.
n'est-ce pas?
And so, the stage was set. The girl from Hever, the scholar from the Netherlands, the courtier from France, all these fragments coalesced into the woman who stood in that pageant. She had done everything her father asked. She had perfected herself. She had become the ultimate courtier. She was ready to play the Game of Thrones. But games in the Tudor court have no winners, only survivors. Anne Boleyn had all the tools to rise, the intelligence, the style, the perseverance. But she lacked the one thing that would save her, a son. As she danced in the Chateau Vert, winning the admiration of the court, the clock was already ticking. The time would come, as she wrote in her prayer book, but it wouldn't be the time she hoped for. She had arrived at the center of the world,
I dare say
unaware
your
that she
fan
was
hides
walking
nothing but the
straight
truth of
toward
your
the edge of a
amusement.
cliff.
And your compliments hide
The
nothing
rise
but your
was
intentions,
spectacular.
my lord.
The fall
Know
would
what
be
is
legendary.
expected of you.
Subscribe to the channel.
Everything depends on
History
this.
is darker than you
Do
think.
not forget who you are
Don't miss the
serving.
next episode where the game turns deadly.